new threat from ISIS, the terror group, releasing yet another video threatening attacks, this time on New York. Nothing really new there. Security had already been increased in New York and other major American cities following Friday's attacks here in Paris. Congressman Adam Schiff is the ranking Democrat of the House Intelligence Committee. I spoke to him just before the program this evening. Congressman Schiff, this new video threat from ISIS to New York, previously obviously they'd made a threat earlier in the week against Washington, D.C. Do you believe there is an imminent threat against the United States from ISIS?
I don't think there's an imminent threat of the kind of attack that we saw in Paris. We're a hard target to reach, and ISIS has made it clear they put a focus on attacking Europe because of its proximity and the number of foreign fighters that have gone back to Europe. But there is a risk in New York and elsewhere that people are inspired by the Paris attacks. Homegrown radicals heed the call to lash out. So that is really primarily the danger we're focused on right now.
In terms of cooperation between European intelligence agencies, European law enforcement, and American, how close is it? Are you satisfied with the level of cooperation? Because clearly there's problems within Europe with data sharing between governments here.
There is a problem in sharing between governments. We have a very good relationship with the French. We have a very close relationship, obviously, with the British and others. Nonetheless, it can be improved. I think the level of cooperation with France is going to intensify in the wake of this. But it's a real challenge, and I think even with the best of intelligence sharing, as long as ISIS is allowed to maintain that ground in Iraq and Syria, as long as they have the luxury to plan and plot from there and have the resources to do it, even the best of intelligence isn't going to be enough to stop them every time. And that's the real heart of the matter.
In terms of refugees, we've seen a number of governors, obviously, in the United States saying they do not want to accept and will not accept Syrian refugees inside their states. France's president, despite all that is going on here, has said that they will move forward to accept some 20,000 refugees from Syria over the next 2 years. Do you see a real security threat from refugees coming from Syria into the United States?
You know, I understand people's concerns about this, and people watching in Paris are appalled at the level of violence and want to make sure we're doing everything possible to avoid any kind of repetition of that in the United States. But the refugee program has not been the problem for us. Among the 2,000 or so refugees we've taken over the last several years from Syria, not a single one of them has been arrested on a terrorism-related offense. And in fact, of the 750,000 refugees we've taken in since 9/11, very few, if any, problems have occurred within that refugee population. For whatever reason, Anderson, the problem we've had here in the United States has been homegrown radicals inspired by ISIS. But the refugees who are fleeing violence or fleeing for their lives have not been the problem. And frankly, there are much greater security risks than that one. And I hate to see us turning our back on this population that's so desperately in need.
Finally, the picture that was put out by ISIS of what they say is the device which brought down the Russian plane in the Sinai, how confident are you that TSA in the United States would be able to catch such a device, whether or not that would show up on radar and screening by TSA?
Well, this is a grave concern of mine, and frankly, I think it's a much bigger risk than anything having to do with the refugee program. And that is, when we test our TSA, all too often they fail. And that is when we do blind tests of whether we can smuggle weapons or explosives in. All too often TSA fails to meet those tests. And that has to change. And we have a new director of TSA, and I think he's very well regarded and respected. And I think he is trying to change that. But until I see different results, I'm going to continue to press on this because it remains, I think, a real vulnerability for us.
Congressman Schiff, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Anderson.